The luxury shopping mall was buzzing with energy. Families shopping, teenagers laughing, business professionals grabbing coffee. But in the middle of the crowd, a commotion broke out. A white woman, mid-50s, dressed in expensive designer clothes, gripped a young black girl's purse with shaking hands. Her voice cut through the noise. "Thief! I saw you take it. Give it back right now." The teenager, 16-year-old Aisha Carter, stood frozen. Her pulse raced. "What? This is my bag," she said, pulling back. But the woman refused to listen. People stopped walking. Security was approaching. All eyes were on Aisha. She could see it on their faces, the doubt, the judgment. But what none of them knew, the police were about to arrive, and what they did next would leave everyone speechless. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe in justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories. Aisha tightened her grip on her purse, her hands trembling. She could feel dozens of eyes watching. The white woman still had her fingers wrapped around the strap, refusing to let go. "This is mine," Aisha insisted, her voice breaking from frustration. But the woman, Karen Whitmore, wasn't listening. She was too busy performing. "Oh, so now you're lying too." Karen scoffed loudly, looking around for support. "I know how this works. I saw you take this bag." Aisha's stomach twisted. It didn't matter that this was her purse, the one she had saved up for months to buy. It didn't matter that she had the receipt inside. Because people like Karen never needed proof. And in this moment, Aisha realized, neither did the crowd. 16 years old, bright and ambitious, with dreams of becoming a fashion designer. An honor student working part-time at a bookstore to save for college. Recently bought her dream purse after saving for months, a designer bag she adored. Kind and patient, but today, she wasn't about to be walked over. Aisha had experienced side glances and suspicious stares before. But this was different. This was humiliation. Mid-50s, wealthy and entitled. Shops at the mall regularly, sees herself as someone who knows the community, raised to believe certain people don't belong in high-end spaces, the type to always be right, and refuses to apologize, even when she's wrong. Genuinely believes Aisha must have stolen the bag, because she can't imagine her being able to afford it. Karen hadn't even checked her own purse. She hadn't even asked Aisha a single question. She had just assumed, because in her mind, a young black girl with an expensive bag could only mean one thing. The high-end shopping district, packed with people. Expensive stores with glass walls, mannequins dressed in designer clothes. Mall security standing at a distance, observing but not interfering, yet. The air is thick with judgment. Some people record with their phones, others whisper. A barista from a nearby coffee shop watches, shaking her head in disbelief. Aisha felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The security guards were approaching. She knew exactly what was about to happen. They weren't coming to help her. They were coming to believe Karen. Aisha had seen this happen before. She remembered the news stories. She had heard her parents warn her about situations like this. She knew how quickly innocence could turn into guilt in the eyes of the wrong people. So, she did something Karen didn't expect. She stood up taller. "Check the security cameras," Aisha said, her voice firm. Karen blinked, caught off guard. "No need. I saw you." "Then prove it," Aisha shot back. "Let's go to the cameras, right now." Karen hesitated, because for the first time she wasn't in control of the story anymore. And that terrified her. The security guard stepped forward, eyeing Aisha suspiciously. "We need to wait for the police," one of them said. Aisha's heart pounded. Karen smirked, arms crossed. "Good. Let's see what they have to say. But what neither of them realized, the officers who were about to arrive weren't the ones Karen expected. The tension in the air was suffocating. Aisha stood still but firm, her purse still clutched tightly in her hands. Karen, standing beside her, had a smirk on her face, arms crossed, waiting. The security guards positioned themselves near Aisha, their stance cautious, not aggressive, but prepared to take action. "We need to wait for the police," one of them said, his voice even, but his eyes already filled with suspicion. Karen grinned, satisfied. "Good. Let's see what they have to say." Aisha's heart pounded against her ribs. She knew how this looked. A young black girl in a high-end mall being accused by a white woman. Security already siding with the concerned citizen. Whispers in the crowd. Some people believing Karen without question. The same thing always happened in these situations. The assumption, the accusation, and then the punishment. It didn't matter that she had done nothing wrong. It didn't matter that the bag was hers, because in moments like this, truth didn't always matter. Karen noticed Aisha's silence and took it as a sign of weakness. She shook her head dramatically, turning to the security guard closest to her. "You see how she's acting? She's nervous because she's guilty." Aisha's jaw tightened. Karen smirked, playing up her role. "These kids think they can just take whatever they want these days. It's disgusting. I work hard for my money." A few bystanders nodded along. The assumption was spreading. Aisha must have stolen it. Why else would this woman accuse her? The bystanders didn't know Karen, but they didn't need to, because she looked like someone they trusted. And Aisha? She looked like someone they had been taught to doubt, but what Karen hadn't expected. Aisha wasn't the type to back down. She straightened her shoulders and took a slow breath. "This bag is mine," she said, clear and unwavering. "I saved up for it. I have the receipt, and I'm not going anywhere until you check the security cameras." The security guard hesitated, because unlike Karen, Aisha wasn't panicking. She wasn't stumbling over her words. She was calm, confident, and that confidence made people stop and think. For the first time, some of the onlookers started questioning Karen's story. Karen wasn't expecting resistance. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Now you're trying to act innocent? How convenient." But there was a new energy in the crowd. One woman whispered to her friend, "She's asking for the cameras. If she was guilty, wouldn't she try to leave?" A young man shook his head. "Yeah, something feels off about this." Karen noticed the shift. Her confidence wavered. Because for the first time, the crowd wasn't fully on her side anymore. The sound of sirens filled the air. Karen perked up, ready to be proven right. "Aisha?" She simply folded her arms and waited. The glass doors slid open, and two police officers walked in. A tall, black officer with a strong, authoritative presence. A Latina officer, calm but observant, scanning the scene. Karen's smirk faded slightly. Because these weren't the officers she expected. She had assumed they'd be on her side. But as the black officer's gaze landed on Aisha, something changed. He saw the truth immediately, and in that moment, Karen realized something terrifying. She wasn't in control anymore. The officer turned to Aisha first. "Are you okay?" he asked. Karen's mouth fell open. That wasn't how this was supposed to go, because in her mind, the police were supposed to believe her, not the black girl. Aisha exhaled slowly, meeting the officer's gaze. "I'm fine," she said, "but I'd really like you to check the cameras now." Karen sputtered, trying to regain her footing. "Wait, why are you asking her if she's okay? I'm the one who called you." The Latina officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, take a deep breath. Let's hear both sides of the story." Karen's face turned red. This wasn't how it was supposed to go, and she was about to find out just how wrong she had been. The tension in the air thickened as the two officers stood between Aisha and Karen. The entire mall had gone silent, shoppers watching closely to see what would happen next. Officer Daniels, the tall black officer, kept his eyes on Aisha. He had seen this scenario too many times before. "Are you okay?" he asked again, his voice calm but firm. Karen stepped forward in outrage. "Why are you asking her if she's okay?" she snapped. "I'm the victim here. This girl stole my purse and she refuses to give it back." Officer Ramirez, the Latina officer, narrowed her eyes. "Ma'am, we're here to assess the situation fairly," she said. "Let's start with some questions." Karen's confidence wavered for the first time, because this wasn't going how she had expected. Aisha held her purse close and took a slow, steady breath. "This is my bag," she said. "I bought it with my own money. I have the receipt inside." Officer Daniels nodded. "Can you show it to us?" Aisha unclasped the purse, reaching inside. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. She pulled out the small folded receipt from the store. Officer Ramirez took it, reading the details carefully. The date matched. The item matched. The name on the receipt? Aisha Carter. The Latina officer looked up at Karen. "Ma'am, did you purchase a purse like this today?" Karen hesitated. "Well, no," she admitted. "But I have one just like it, and I misplaced it earlier." She could have picked it up. Officer Daniels turned to the mall security guard. "Can you access the security footage?" The security guard nodded quickly. Karen's face went pale. "This is ridiculous," Karen hissed under her breath. She wasn't used to being doubted. She wasn't used to being questioned. And she definitely wasn't used to people standing up to her. But for the first time, she felt the power slipping from her hands. Minutes later, a mall employee rushed over with a tablet. "We pulled the footage," he said. Officer Ramirez played the video. The crowd leaned in. The footage showed Karen shopping. Then, it showed her walking out of a store, without a purse. Aisha had walked into the same store minutes later, already holding her own bag. The truth was crystal clear. Karen had never been robbed. She had simply jumped to conclusions. Officer Daniels turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you falsely accused this young woman of theft," he said, his voice sharp. Karen stammered, shaking her head. "But I really thought you physically grabbed her. You publicly humiliated her. And you wasted police resources over an assumption." Karen tried to backtrack. "I was just trying to do the right thing. How was I supposed to know?" Officer Ramirez's eyes darkened. "By not assuming a black teenager couldn't afford something nice." The crowd murmured in agreement. People who had doubted Aisha just moments ago now looked at Karen with disgust. "What happens now?" Aisha asked, her voice steady. Officer Daniels looked at her seriously. "You have two options," he said. "You can walk away, or you can press the charges for harassment and assault." Karen's eyes widened. "Assault? Are you kidding me? It was just a misunderstanding." Aisha's hands curled into fists. It had never been just a misunderstanding. Karen hadn't just accused her. She had humiliated her, grabbed her, tried to turn the entire mall against her. And now she wanted to walk away like nothing had happened. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for Aisha's response. Karen held her breath. Officer Daniels stayed neutral. Aisha took a deep breath, and then she made her choice. Aisha stood still, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The officers, the crowd, the recording phones, everyone was waiting for her decision. She looked at Karen, who was still breathing heavily, her face flushed. "This is ridiculous," Karen muttered under her breath. "It was a misunderstanding." But Aisha knew the truth. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Karen never once considered she could be wrong. She never gave Aisha the benefit of the doubt, and now she was desperate to avoid the consequences. Officer Daniel's voice broke the silence. Aisha, you have every right to press charges for harassment and assault. Aisha felt her heart pounding. Karen had grabbed her. Karen had publicly humiliated her. Karen had expected the police to take her side without question. But now, Karen was the one facing the consequences. Aisha took a deep breath. I won't press charges, she finally said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Karen looked shocked. You're serious, Karen stammered. For now, Aisha added, her voice firm, but only on one condition. Officer Ramirez folded her arms. And what would that be? Aisha stepped forward, staring Karen straight in the eye. You apologize. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. Karen's face twisted. I don't... No excuses, Aisha cut in. You accused me in public, so you're going to apologize in public. The crowd watched in silence. Karen's entire body stiffened. She had never been held accountable before. She had always assumed her privilege would protect her. And now, for the first time, it wasn't enough. Karen swallowed hard. I guess I might have overreacted, she mumbled. Aisha raised an eyebrow. That's not an apology. Karen winced. She glanced around, realizing there was no escape. The cameras were still rolling. The officers were waiting. Her reputation was already ruined. So finally, she gave in. She looked Aisha in the eye. I'm sorry, she said. Sorry for what? Aisha asked. Karen's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. For accusing you of something you didn't do, she muttered. And? Karen gritted her teeth. And for assuming you stole my purse. It was wrong. The crowd murmured. Some people nodded in approval. But Aisha, she wasn't smiling. Because she knew the apology wasn't real. Karen wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. But that was her problem. Aisha had taken her power back. And that was enough. The officers turned to Karen. Ma'am, you are officially banned from this shopping mall, Officer Ramirez said. Karen's eyes widened. Wait, what? I've shopped here for years. Not anymore, the officer replied. Karen looked around for support, but no one was on her side. She had expected to walk away victorious. Instead, she was walking away in shame. As Karen turned to leave, humiliated, Aisha exhaled deeply. Officer Daniels placed a hand on her shoulder. You handled that with more strength than most adults would, he said. Aisha nodded, processing everything. She had won. But then, her phone buzzed. A message from her father. Meet me at the courthouse in an hour. There's something bigger happening here. Aisha's stomach flipped. Because what happened today, it wasn't just about her. It was part of something bigger. And she wasn't done fighting yet. Aisha stared at her phone. Her father's message still glowing on the screen. Meet me at the courthouse in an hour. There's something bigger happening here? She took a deep breath, her hands still slightly shaky from the encounter at the mall. She had stood her ground, forced Karen to apologize, and watched her get banned from the shopping center. But something inside Aisha still felt unsettled, because this wasn't just about her. This was about every black person who had been accused without reason. This was about all the times people like Karen got away with it. And now, her father was calling her to take the fight even further. An hour later, Aisha stepped out of an Uber in front of the courthouse. Her father, James Carter, was already waiting. A well-respected civil rights attorney, known for fighting cases of racial profiling, had taken on corporations, police departments, and now he was ready to take on Karen. He greeted Aisha with a nod, immediately noticing the exhaustion in her eyes. Are you okay? He asked. She shrugged. I don't know yet. Her father studied her for a moment. You did the right thing back there, he said, But Karen isn't the real problem. She's just a symptom. Aisha narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Her father pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and handed it to her. Inside were multiple case files, other black teens falsely accused of theft, employees wrongfully fired because of racial bias, even lawsuits against shopping malls for racial discrimination. Aisha's stomach turned. This happens all the time, doesn't it? She whispered. Her father nodded. And I think it's time we did something about it. Aisha and her father stepped inside the courthouse, heading toward a private legal meeting. Lawyers who had handled similar cases were present. Community leaders were speaking out. Even the press had started covering racial profiling in malls. Aisha sat quietly, listening as the cases were discussed. A black teenage boy accused of stealing sneakers, just because he picked them up to check the size. A Latina woman followed through a department store, just because of her appearance. A black father stopped in a parking lot because someone thought his car was stolen. Every story felt painfully familiar, because what happened to her wasn't unique. Meanwhile, Karen's life was unraveling. She had been banned from the shopping mall. The video of her false accusation had gone viral. Her job was considering a review of conduct due to public backlash. She had thought this would just go away, but now Karen was facing real consequences. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the victim. She was the lesson. A few days later, Aisha sat in a TV studio preparing for her first ever news interview. Her story had caught national attention. People were talking about racial profiling in stores, and Aisha was becoming the voice of a bigger movement. The host turned to her. Aisha, what do you want people to learn from your experience? She took a deep breath before speaking. I want people to understand that this isn't just about me. This happens to black and brown people every single day, and most of the time, they don't get justice. The host nodded. And what do you think needs to change? Aisha leaned forward, her voice steady. Stores need real training for their employees. People like Karen need to be held accountable. And more than anything, we need to stop assuming guilt just because of skin color. The host looked directly into the camera. This conversation is long overdue, and thanks to young people like Aisha, change might finally be coming. Later that night, Aisha and her father sat together watching the interview replay on TV. Her father smiled proudly. You made an impact today. Aisha exhaled, staring at the screen. I just told the truth, she said. Sometimes, that's all it takes to start a revolution. And with that, she knew. Her fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Aisha sat on her couch watching the interview replay on TV. She had spoken the truth, and now the world was listening. Social media was flooded with support. News outlets were reporting on racial profiling in malls. People were demanding real change. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. Proud of you. This is just the beginning. Aisha smiled to herself, because for the first time since that awful moment in the mall, she felt powerful. Not because Karen had faced consequences, but because her story was making a difference. What do you think about Aisha's story? Have you ever experienced or witnessed racial profiling? How should businesses handle discrimination like this? Do you think Karen truly learned her lesson? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in justice and accountability, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more powerful content. Because these stories, they need to be told. See you in the next one.